The press is being wildly irresponsible here as we try to figure out what's next with this coronavirus situation. I have to deep dive into this with you today. We'll work through all the angles together. I really still stick to take precautions, take it seriously. Everyone needs to calm down. Or not everybody, but people that are acting like this is the zombie apocalypse. And there really are people that are taking that approach. They think that if they don't get the last mask from their local drugstore or something, that somehow they're not going to be one of those who makes it through this. We have dealt with pandemics before as a species. We will deal with pandemics again. There are some takeaways from all of this. One of my most important ones is perhaps we shouldn't focus so much on science that doesn't really matter and doesn't affect any of our lives. Perhaps there shouldn't be this obsession with climate change and CO2 emissions when we all know that it's just a matter of time. Any given year, millions and millions of people could contract a truly high mortality, virulent pathogen. And then all of a sudden we realize, wow, maybe we should have spent that money on something else. Maybe we could have taken a different approach. And I think hopefully this is one of these moments where we start to think about where we should really put our priority. The Green New Deal, all that stuff, that's a fake religious belief that they won't admit as a religious belief. It has nothing to do with actually saving the world or saving the planet. These people are absurd. Dealing with coronavirus, this is very real. Pandemic disease is very real. And I assure you, if we were to go back and look at the archives of this show, I believe I was asked a question maybe even last summer, what scares you? And I remember this now. I said, pandemic disease scares me. That's something that we have to be serious about, and that's where we are now. The Dow down almost, 2,000 points on a plunge today related to fears over this virus, which there's a whole lot that goes into that. Fears over the virus, but also a decision about oil production with OPEC and OPEC Plus. I'll give you some of that storyline as well, just so we're all up to speed on it. But I just wanted to start today by telling you that, the media really cannot resist this opportunity to slowly drag the public through a collective panic attack, because it's a lazy way to drive audience, to get clicks, to get viewers, and to hysterically trash Trump all day long. Plus, somehow we are supposed to come away from all of this thinking that confused, corrupt, inept Joe Biden would do so much better, that Joe Biden would be saving us, whereas Trump is leading us into disaster. I mean, this is entirely unserious. This is, and it's reckless. It's damaging. It's not just something that I think we should hold them to account for in terms of the politics, but also there are real effects here. I mean, Dr. Drew in that clip was talking about how people's lives are being upended. There are going to be businesses might not recover, some of them, from this. There are places now that they're in their busy season. Huge concerts are being canceled, huge gatherings, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue at South by Southwest in Austin. Say hi to all of our folks down in KLBJ, Austin. Hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue just gone, basically. There's all this additional quarantine over the weekend that has taken place in northern Italy. About a quarter of all of Italy is now technically under quarantine. It also has one of the oldest populations in the world. I would note that if the Chinese, in a country, a very densely packed country of now, do you believe the Chinese numbers? Probably not. Maybe they're just trying to game the system and hope that their economy will not be as badly bruised by this if they downplay the severity of the cases in their own country. That's possible. But if you believe some of the Chinese numbers, that's a huge if, they have been able to turn the curve in the other direction now, so that there are fewer and fewer, not less, fewer and fewer cases of this with each passing day. And if they can do that in a billion-plus person, often very densely packed together China, it's certainly possible to get this under control in other places. So the Dow plummeting now has all these people who are prophets of doom. And I find that to be very lazy. You notice I don't come on the radio show and day after day find some way to try to frighten people all the time. There are other shows that really, and they're conservatives, and they do that all the time. The country's going to hell. Everything's terrible. You know, the libs are ruining everything, and any day now we're going to no longer have a constitution. There are real threats. There are real concerns. I think the rise of socialism is something, even with Bernie Sanders not becoming necessarily the Democrat primary opponent, it's something we have to take very seriously in this country and look at why we go to this point, why we would repeat these mistakes made in the past by so many other countries and expand upon these socialist mistakes in our own country, in our own economy. But all that said, I don't show up here every day and tell you that, we're all going to die, or that, the caliphate is going to take over America any day, or there's all kinds of things. Although it is true, and I like to say this, we are all going to die. That's a fact. We're just not all going to die from coronavirus. In fact, very, very few of us, I think, in the overall percentage will succumb to coronavirus. In a sense, this is a reminder in our modern era where we all see life expectancy. We see life expectancy getting higher generally. I know there's been a drop in life expectancy in America for white males because of opioid addiction specifically and the deaths from it. But overall, if you look at the last 100 years or so, we're living longer and healthier, longer and healthier, longer and healthier. That's our expectation. And we get into this mindset of everything's going to keep getting better, everything's going to keep getting stronger. We've had a stock market now that has been essentially going up for 10 years, and some people would say that it's really a 20-year bull market with a blip in it. One thing that I do love is watching all these different supposed experts in the market and in investing go on TV and tell us things that are either so obvious that they don't really need to be said, or that are so stupid I'm surprised anybody would go on TV to say it. And this is their job, is to tell us about, sometimes the market goes up, sometimes the market goes down. Thanks, Bob. So this is where we are now. Recognizing that markets do come down, recognizing that pandemic disease is real, that there are still challenges even in our incredibly comfortable modern world, especially in the developed world, especially here in America. We are all mortal, and we are having to think about that and face that in a way we haven't in a long time. We have not had a draft for the military in how many decades? We've had a very small percentage of this country that is effectively the warrior class of America. They are our warriors. They go, they choose to fight America's battles at home and abroad. I mean, they choose to be the ones who are defending us, defending the Constitution. We have not had a draft in many decades, and we have not had a mass casualty war along the lines of what we saw in the early to mid 20th century in a very long time as well, right? I mean, you'd have to go back to Vietnam, and that was mass casualties stretched over many years. We have gotten very comfortable. We've gotten, as a country, I think a little bit soft about our expectations of what the future is going to be like and how there's not going to be that much struggle. I mean, this is why you've had in the last couple of years completely made up controversies about Trump working with the Russians, and this captured the American imagination of the left, of Democrats for sure, and we had to sit through this and fight through this lunacy. But that's really only possible because we weren't fighting a huge war, because we weren't in the midst of a depression or a major recession, because there weren't things that were keeping us up late at night that were imminent threats to our safety, to our family, to our well-being in the way that other generations have dealt with. So I think our mentality had gotten a little bit soft, as evidenced by all the different things that we spend, the media spends time talking to you about, focusing on, the latest in the transgender, equality movement, or whether women should be able to compete in men's sports, or just think of any issue that's gotten a hyper focus from the media that often we have to engage with on the right, try to refute, try to say, no, that's not a good idea. No, we shouldn't be so. Green New Deal is perhaps the best example of this. I mean, that's just a giant lunacy fest. It makes no sense whatsoever. But we had real time spent on this issue. Yeah, we're going to rebuild every building in the country. We're going to dramatically transform our economy. we forget sometimes that the economy can be a somewhat fragile thing. I mean, there have been empires, there have been great states of the past, nation states where, or in the pre-nation state, pre-Westphalian era, just the hegemon all of a sudden, collapses slowly, then suddenly, right? That's what ends up being the epitaph, is that it took a while and it didn't really, and then all of a sudden, boom, gone. So to talk about moving trillions of dollars around in the healthcare system or trillions of dollars around because of the Green New Deal, these were only conversations that we could have because everything in this country was seeming to trend in the right direction, despite, and now really think, now that we have a real crisis at least to deal with, think about all the false crises we've had to deal with in the last 3 years. And this is one of the problems that the media has created, is that, of course, I'm skeptical of any media criticism of Trump's response to coronavirus, because all they do is criticize it. They don't take a step back and call balls and strikes. They don't pick their shots. It's everything Trump does is horrible. Every decision he makes, whether it was stopping the flights in from China. I remember, I've actually got a whole thread of all these different news stories. Experts say this is not a good idea. Experts say, well, now we're talking about experts saying that we should have bigger and bigger lockdowns and don't get on a cruise ship. You're hearing experts say things like that. Don't do it. And you don't need to tell me that, by the way. There are a few things that sound more hellish to me these days than being stuck on a cruise ship for a few weeks in quarantine, stuck in my cruise ship room. I would lose my mind. So I've never been a cruise person. It's not my cup of tea, but especially these days, it's not a particularly good idea. I think we all can understand why. So I sit here and I try to take the most fair-minded, objective assessment of this current situation as I can. And I really do believe that we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And there are people who you have to remember, and this goes back to what I told you last week, they are rooting for failure here. And part of rooting for failure is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if they get people more scared, if they create enough anxiety, then that alone affects decision-making, affects the way people go about their daily lives, business investment, hiring, all these different things, so that the fondest wish, the greatest hope of the Democrats is Trump will go into re-election in the midst of a recession. Some have been open about that. Some have been willing to say that they just want there to be a recession. They don't care how painful that is for Americans and what that really means for us. Many of them are hoping that that's what's going to happen. They're hoping for a recession. Are they hoping for there to be real grounds based on the numbers to say that Trump let coronavirus get out of control here? I'd like to think the answer is no, but unfortunately, I believe there are people who would make that trade-off because they think that Trump is the greatest threat to this country that has ever existed, which is something only crazy people can think, but they do believe it. There are millions and millions of Democrats, of leftists, who have adopted that as their core belief, their core position on all things going on in the country. Trump is the single biggest threat. And so they can't objectively talk about any of this stuff. And that's why the media just just factors into this hysteria and adds to it constantly when, you look at where we are right now, you look at the growth in cases in this country. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but it's going to get better, and it's not going to be that bad. I think if that changes, we'll have a conversation about that too. Why can't everyone just be an adult about this in the media? Why can't everyone just put aside how much they hate Trump? We're going to talk more about Biden later on in the show. Does anyone really think that Joe Biden has great judgment and they'd feel so much better? If you would sleep better at night knowing Joe Biden is president right now instead of Trump, I'd like to know why. Unless Burisma is writing you checks for $80,000 a month to do nothing, I want to know why you think Joe Biden would be better in this role. What evidence is there for it? Joe Biden is a mediocrity who has just done whatever he's had to do his entire career to keep getting elected. That's all he does. That's all he cares about. No leadership, no good judgment, not an intellectual, not even particularly smart, not particularly ethical, not inspiring. But that's what you were supposed to take away from so much of this criticism over Trump doesn't take it seriously to hear what he said in this press conference because Joe Biden would be so much better. That's an unserious position. Hey Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.